right, welcome back, everybody. Thanks again for joining us at the Training, Learning, and Development Community's Accessible and Inclusive Design Conference. Hope you've been having a great experience so far. This is day 4. I've had just so many amazing sessions this past week. It was great to hear from Dustin Gianelli in that last session there, but I hope you were able to take a quick break and are re-energized to meet our latest guest, who is Deborah G Harris, talking about embracing learner variability. I have a short bio to read. Deborah is a 15-year L&D professional with expertise in learning strategy, design, and delivery. She serves as the founder and chief learning strategist for ICU Learning, a learning education and development consultant agency. Her training catalog includes, but is not limited to, situational leadership, imposter syndrome, that's something that I suffer from constantly, DEI, and receiving feedback. Deborah is very dedicated to advocating and creating learning content for historically underrepresented groups. Deborah, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here at AIDC. I'm so glad that you're here. And thanks to Alan out there who had highly recommended you join us. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hide myself from the screen and let you take it away.
Fantastic. I need to bring Lewis everywhere to do my intro. That was wonderful. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. If you are just joining the AIDC conference for the first time, welcome to the third session of the day. If not, thank you for tagging along into this discussion. As Lewis mentioned earlier, my name is Deborah G Harris. I actually am zooming in from Lake in the Hills, Illinois. That's where I reside with my 3 boys, founder of ICU Learning. And what ICU Learning actually stands for, it's a double entendre. It stands for Immersive Culture of Universal Learning. And the name is meant to imply about just being engaged, fully engaged, surrounded and immersed in the elements that make us feel like we're seen and represented through culture, language, arts, all of the things that make us feel like us, right? And I combine that with the word of universal. I combined universal and immersive because I wanted to create a learning space where I get to strategize, design and deliver courses that I truly care about, that I'm very passionate about. And I believe that learning is more fun when it's engaging and captivating, but also can be enjoyed and appreciated by people from diverse backgrounds and cultures and abilities and preferences. And that's why I chose the topic of learner variability. And I'm so excited to discuss that with you. As you notice on the screen, it says my favorite food is fried sweet plantains. And I just wanted to share that with you all because food is just another thing that's universal, right? It brings us back to where we started and it gives us nostalgic feelings. So I'm going to ask all of you in the chat to share not only what your location is, but your current role and what your favorite food is. That's a picture of the sweet plantains right there. Above the sweet plantains, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner of the slide, there is a number 1 with a chat box. You're going to see that chat box with a number in it throughout the slide deck. And it's really just an indicator to say, hey, share with me, put some thoughts in the chat or answer a question that I may have for you. So let me see where you are from, where you're calling in from, your title, and your favorite dish. I'm looking for the chat, though. It disappeared from me. Hold on. Can you all hear me? Awesome. Okay, tostones. I see it. I'm looking to my right, so I hope you know that I'm just looking at the chat here. Thank you for the welcome, Daphne. Maduro. So you know it's delicious, right? Fayetteville, Kimberly, hi. Cheesecake is your favorite. I love it. I love cheesecake too. I like the New York style cheesecake. I'm from New York, so I like that raspberry drizzle on it. Hi, Stephen from Dover. Instructional designer, buffalo wings, love it. Is anybody else getting hungry? I'm sorry. Washington, D.C. in the house. Kalila, where is AB? Is that in? Please let me know where that is, Kalila. I'm very interested to know where you're calling from. Lacey Washington. Hi, Lisa. Awesome. Keep sharing in the chat where you're from. This is a beautiful way for us to mingle and chat freely and get to know who we are and what we love, and some amazing memories that come from food that we eat. I just love talking about that stuff and food. But besides food, let's talk about why you're here today and what we're going to learn. Okay. The course objectives for today is really for me to spark your interest in adult learning. I want us to collectively learn about learner variability when it comes to adults, because typically when you look up learner variability, it tells you much more from the perspective of being a teacher with young students that are under the age of 18. So I'd like to spark your interest in adult learning variability. The second is I want to discuss the importance of it and the importance of embracing learner variability. And lastly, I'm going to introduce, I love acronyms if you haven't picked up already with the ICU learning. I'm going to introduce self-care practices. Self standing for social emotional learning fundamentals. And it is going to tie in with how we can actually promote learner variability. And the whole purpose of this is to create inclusive and empowering learning environments that celebrate the uniqueness of every adult learner. Okay, so let's start off by defining learner variability. Learner variability, I have to tell you, I didn't know much about it. So when I first heard about learner variability, I went back to when I first started training 15 years ago, like Lewis said, oh my goodness. And I automatically thought learning styles, learning preferences. You know, when you had to take that learning styles assessment and find out if you were kinesthetic, visual, or auditory, I automatically thought that that's what learner variability was. But I started to dig a little bit more and I found that there was not a lot of literature after 2020. So, right around the end, the beginning of the pandemic, research stopped. But there are a couple of learner variability projects out there that I'm excited about and I dug into. And the term learner variability encourages us to look at the whole person, okay? As opposed to categorizing them like the learner styles assessment does as kinesthetic or visual or auditory. And the term variability tells us not to anticipate that everyone is going to interact or understand things in the same ways. It considers how a person shows up in a learning space, what needs must be met for them to be able to absorb and process the concepts and content effectively. And it also looks at the emotional drivers that translates the concepts that they've learned into action. So adult learners are very unique in their skills. You know this. You're all adults in the virtual room. And our needs and our backgrounds and our research show that there are different factors that affect how we learn in different environments. And the benefits of learning about all of those differences is that it promotes an active learning environment and creative collaboration. It also encourages learning practitioners, such as you and myself, to be more proactive in honoring lived experiences, which is very different from our young adults, right? When you look up learner variabilities and it talks about the young students, they don't have as many lived experiences to factor into their learning. So they're a lot more malleable, they're a lot more receptive to the learning, and there's not as many barriers there. It also allows us to create environments where people with diagnosed and undiagnosed abilities feel affirmed. They feel seen. They feel considered. And they feel empowered because now they have all the equipment that they need. Because we put into consideration how they learn when putting together the content. And how did we do that? Through the learner's makeup. We consider each learner's academic, social, and emotional learning and tie it in with their experiences and their environments and the exposures that they've had. And so I'm going to go ahead and ask a question. This is going to be a chat question, if you notice that number 2 in the chat box, about the factors that impact someone's ability to learn. I've given you a couple of examples. You'll see them on the screen. Some factors that I've included that impact someone's ability to learn are socioeconomic status, cognitive skills, intrapersonal awareness, cultural norms, and learning abilities and disabilities. So, my question for you, and I'm going to switch over to my other screen here as you share in the chat. What are other factors that you can think of that may impact someone's ability to learn? I see biases, okay. Communication style, health, stress, trauma experiences, current or past, absolutely. Their environment, just basic needs being met, is what Stephen said. Sensory disruption, absolutely. Home situation, these are very interesting. Some of these I didn't even think about, actually. Working from home with my toddler during the pandemic was something else. Yeah, it totally changed. I had a more intimate knowledge and experience with my kids. Now I feel like I know them inside and out. But yeah, I got to tell you, Christy, it was definitely an experience. Gabrielle said environment as well. Interpersonal. Yes, Jenna. So there's intrapersonal and there's interpersonal. Anyone want to discuss the difference between the two? Erica says access to academic materials, language barriers. Kamal, absolutely. Cultural differences, motivation, sense of belonging. Absolutely. Neurodivergent status, religious time constraints. Imagine all of these things that people have to consider when starting a new job, right? Learning a new skill, maybe training someone else, right? Peer to peer training. All of these factors need to be considered. Absolutely. Great examples. There was a quote that I found from Todd Rose that said, "When we design for the average, we design for no one." Todd Rose led a TED talk called The Myth of Average, where he emphasized that there was no such thing as an average learner. And that seems very basic, right? In just saying it out loud, because the fact of the matter is, each and every one of us has a unique DNA, and our brains are all different in how we process information. So it should be, self-explanatory. But for so long, education and training and learning had a massive blanket, just kind of one size fits all, standardized testing, et cetera, that didn't really consider all the variabilities, right? And so there was a huge emphasis on, well, the average person would know this, and the average person should be taught this way. And so Todd Rose, I think it was back in 2013, held a TED Talk, and he was very passionate about, there was no such thing as an average learner. There's some learner variability principles that were introduced in a website, as well as an article called Empower the Learner. And I love these learner variability principles. Becoming familiar with these principles positions us to take a more holistic view of our learners and say, I see you. You see what I did there? I see you. I see your life experiences. I see your developmental stage. I see your learning differences. This statement of I see you, right, can hold true for parents. It can hold true for leaders, friends, spouses, and us learning practitioners. This is language that is universal and can be used in both life and work spaces. Imagine how cool it would be if someone felt empowered to say, I learn best when my unique advantages and adversities are identified, acknowledged, and understood. Hmm, pause. That feels empowering. I learn best when my experiences align with where I am developmentally. How empowering is that in a one on one conversation with your leader? I learn best when my unique learning needs are identified and the resources provided are aligned with those needs. All of these principles are not only empowering, but they're even more effective when there are systems in place to follow through with supportive responses and action plans from our peers, action plans from our leaders, and our loved ones. There's some organizational benefits that come from it as well, like identifying untapped talent within an organization. We may have overlooked some of those talents because we didn't really consider the person holistically. There's lesser costs. I would love to not have to redesign something that I took hours, days, weeks, months designing because I didn't consider a slice of a population, or because I had to retrain clients that the content did not originally cater to. Or how about the capacity for innovation? I know before or pre-pandemic, when we weren't really training virtually as much, it was kind of taboo. Everybody wanted in-person training, and it was challenging to have to propose that virtual training was effective. And then the pandemic hit, and we had to be super creative with hybrid training, virtual training, bells and whistles and Kahoot and Poll Everywhere, and just all of these really cool, engaging, gadgets and resources that not only helped us facilitate virtual sessions, but it also included a population that needed all of those, what we consider bells and whistles, right? Because now they can be engaged in a totally different way that they weren't before. So sometimes when we think about, um, I don't want to say catering to, because that's not the word I want to use, but when we think about considering a slice of a population and their differences, it actually works for a larger part of the population that we didn't even consider. I'm going to give you an example, and you might come up with one too. The ADA, American Disabilities Act, came into place and started to um, put certain recommendations in place, like having the indenture and the curb, for example, so that wheelchairs can go up into the curb and then there's a ramp. Well, guess who else that helped? That helped people who were riding bicycles, people who were rollerblading. It helped people with carts. It, and then the automatic door opening, that helped a different population as well. So, although the ADA was ensuring that adjustment and that curb was dented for a certain population, it ended up, benefiting a larger group. And so I gave that example because it leads right into the next part of the conversation, which is accessibility. This is the Accessibility and Inclusion Design Conference. So let's talk about it. You probably saw this definition a few times if you've attended other workshops, but I'll just throw it out there, some of which may have some of my definition in there. But accessibility is when we meet the needs of the people from whether they come from a variety of backgrounds, abilities, through our strategy when we're strategizing for training and content, when we're designing the user experience, and then lastly, delivering the content. And it's also making sure that documents, presentations, and content are easier to find, easier to navigate, and are legible. As I am leading this whole discussion, you'll notice some closed captions at the bottom. Now, you have the option of turning them off, but I always like to have them on in the onset because that ensures that everyone knows what I'm saying. And it may be beneficial for those of you who are avid note takers. Accessibility is also ensuring that content is user friendly, interactive, and collaborative. I want to ask you all, what have you learned about accessibility during this conference or even beforehand that surprised you or influenced you to want to do something differently than before? I like your doorboard quote of the month, Scarlett. Thank you for that. Plain language. Curb cut effect. Thank you, Andrea. I was missing the language. Yes. That it helps everyone. Work closer with the learning design team. Absolutely. Lots of opportunity to collaborate, right, Kalila? Colors in the PowerPoint. Ooh, that's a good one too, Scarlett. I am such a sucker for colors. I love things to be flashy and jazzy, but then I realized it's not always the best route to go, especially when it doesn't help with legibility. So, absolutely. That there are challenges some may have but never speak up about it. Yes. And some may not even know that they have those challenges, right? Like, that's why I mentioned in the slide, there are diagnosed abilities and undiagnosed, some misdiagnosed even. And so imagine not necessarily knowing, and therefore you can't articulate what your needs are. And so there is a beautiful symbiotic relationship that can form there with the learning practitioner and the learner when there's an exchange of emotional intelligence to pick up on some cues. Maybe that person is getting hesitant or anxious, or maybe you can tell that they are retreating or not as engaged as they were day one because they feel lost in the sauce, right? So those emotional cues are very important because not everybody knows how to articulate their needs in every instance either. So great one. I have heard so many moving personal stories of people's whys that have made me realize the importance of designing for people with diverse needs. I love that. There was something before that that I saw. When we think about DEI, accessibility is often forgotten. Yes, I absolutely agree with that, Marie. And it has a lot to do with how DEI is introduced and how it's promoted. And so it's up to us as learning practitioners to absolutely carry that language on, right? So, for example, when I was working with a web designer and we were talking about colors and schemes, and I said, I want to make sure that it is inclusive and it's equitable. And, I use the language versus using the tagline DEI because I think DEI steers people in a certain direction sometimes. And I said, so let's make sure that it's ADA design compliant. And he didn't know what I meant. And I think that is so crucial. And it was a beautiful opportunity for me to get to introduce it to him. I'm like, let's talk about it. You're a website designer and a developer. You should absolutely know what ADA design compliance is. Right. And it was a great conversation that he could not wait to dive into and research more about so that he can be more inclusive in his design for his clients. For sure. Megan said things that seem really simple or inconsequential to you can make a huge difference to people with challenges that are different from yours. Absolutely. Someone said something really cool the other day. They said, low effort, high impact. Low effort, high impact. It may seem very small to you, but guess what? Inclusivity doesn't take a lot of effort, but it creates a huge impact. I remember when I had to make my home more inclusive. I didn't know that that's what I would call it. But when I had children, I had to make my home accessible. Um, and some places inaccessible, right? Because they just sticking their fingers in sockets and stuff. But I realized I would have stools in certain bathrooms, and I have the faucet extenders so that they can wash their hands, you know, or seat covers, just these little low effort actions that made it so much easier for my little people to be independent and to feel like they could do things on their own. And they're like, look, mommy, I washed my hands. But before they couldn't reach the faucet. So sometimes it's little things like that that make such a great difference for someone. And it makes them feel included, right? As opposed to me putting a hook way at the top of the closet where they can't hang their backpack. I'm going to lower that hook so he can hang his backpack and not get in trouble for putting his backpack on the floor, you know? So it's just being super helpful and thoughtful and mindful of how you can help someone else, which will eventually help you as well. Um, Learner variability is the rule, not the exception, says Barbara Pape. And I could not agree more. If you want to look up Barbara Pape, she's doing some beautiful things with her Digital Promise project. And I got to learn a lot more about learner variability through her website. So look up Barbara Pape. She's awesome. And I could not agree more. It should be the rule and not the exception. So, speaking of rules, how many of you are familiar with the golden rule? What's the golden rule? Treat others as you wish to be treated. Yes, that's the golden rule, isn't it? Treat others as the way you want to be treated. But how about the platinum rule? Anybody know what the platinum rule is? Yes, Don. Absolutely. Treat others the way they want to be treated. That is the platinum rule. But in order for us to adhere to either one of these rules, right, there has to be some level of self awareness on our parts. We have to know how we learn. We have to know what works best for us. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, right? When we said, I learn best when, right? There's some self awareness that's required. And the more you know about yourself and how you learn, the better and more positioned you are to be able to help others to discover the way they learn and discover how you can actually meet them right there. So, by show of emojis, how many of you have taken the step to communicate? This is question number 4 now. To communicate how you learn to someone. Let me see the emojis. I want to see hearts if you've ever communicated how you learn to someone. Yes, I see some thumbs up. Okay, cool. Thumbs up, hearts. Nice. What did that sound like? Can you share in the chat how you were able to share how you learn and perhaps who you shared it with? Was it a family member? Was it a coworker? I agree, John. You have to ask them and create a safe space for them to welcome. So you said you were polite but firm, and it may have come across bossy, but it was true in what I needed. When you say come across bossy, Don, share more if you don't mind. Kimberly, an apology followed by, but I need to have. Interesting, Kim, that you felt like, oh, I called you Kim like I knew you, like we were buddies, right? Sorry, Kimberly. But interesting that you apologized right before you expressed that need. Why apologize? We feel like we are a burden when we express a need that we have. Isn't that wild? Kim is fine. Cool. Thank you so much for the permission. Daphne, you said, I learn best when I sit in the front of the room away from my friends. Yeah, those friends are no good. Listen, my friends did not allow me to pass anything because they were auditory learners. They would record the courses and go home and listen to it and then just talk throughout the class. So I couldn't sit them near them either. So knowing that you learn best sitting in the front, you were probably the first one, Daphne, to show up to class so you can get that front seat. Sarah said, oh, can you just email that to me because I need the written steps? Nice, very casual, right? Not abrasive at all. Just saying, I would prefer to have it written. Goodness gracious, if you all seen how many sticky notes I have around my desk, you'd be like, Deb, you know you have a laptop, you can type that, right? But I need them. I need my sticky notes. It makes me feel, I don't know, like I can cross it off. I need the checklist. I need it written too. Let me see. I had to bring it up with my supervisor. She relied on heavy text content, and I'm a visual person. We had a great talk, and it opened us up to partner in our content and help each other in areas we are strong in. How cool is that? You are now building a relationship of trust and learning exchange, right? Because you are not only communicating your needs to your leader, but then you guys got to meet afterwards and talk about how to do it differently. That fosters innovation. That creates a space where you can share other needs that you may possibly have, right? Especially in one-on-ones. There is a level of social emotional learning in education that I think is so necessary. And so that's why I'm introducing social emotional learning in this platform, because this kind of approach focuses on how we develop our social and emotional skills to improve our well being, to improve our performance, and our overall success in life. You'll always notice me balancing work and life because I think they go hand in hand. So I like to lean into both of those spaces when it comes to applying the knowledge and just being practical. Quite frankly, it has made me a better parent because I transfer a lot of this stuff into my parenting, and it helps quite a lot. Because as you notice on the right hand corner where I talk about the benefits, it increases your emotional intelligence. You get to identify emotions from social cues and encourage problem solving. And when you encourage problem solving, there's just this feeling of, I'm not a victim. I'm going to do something about this. I came out on the other side. I got to get out of that. What are those trap rooms? Those where you have all the clues to get the key and get out. What is that room? Somebody's going to share it. Escape room. Thanks, Kim. Yes. You get to get out of the proverbial escape room. Problem solving is very empowering, and that's definitely a benefit. But increasing your self-esteem is so important. Lewis talked earlier about imposter syndrome, saying like it's something that he suffers from. Quite frankly, I think everybody suffers either from a little bit or a lot of bit of imposter syndrome. And having a positive outlook and looking at all of the things that you've accomplished is really a beautiful social emotional experience that makes learning and doing new things and change management a lot less scary. Okay. And when we're walking into a learning environment, we just feel like, okay, I can embrace this. And you'll notice that your productivity increases, and more than likely, the organization will appreciate what comes of social emotional learning. And so this is where I'm going to introduce some self-care tips. So again, self-care is an acronym for social emotional learning fundamentals. And these are a couple of considerations that you can put into your repertoire, into your programming, your design. And a lot of it comes from the Universal Design for Learning framework. But you will not believe the beautiful feedback that I had from having an ASL interpreter at one of my live events. It it really changed the atmosphere. It changed how people felt involved and included. And so having ASL interpreters or even promoting to have a budget for an ASL interpreter, I think is wonderful. Um, Empathy development, active listening, conflict resolution, positive communication. We talked about problem solving earlier, goal setting, and resilience building. These are all spaces and factors that you can consider during the design or before the delivery of the content that you are putting together. And it really positions learners not to feel othered if you didn't consider these things beforehand. I'm going to give you a personal example that I experienced. I never really designed content with screen readers in mind. Okay. And I had these learner guides that I had sent out via email beforehand. So everyone can have access to it. They can go through it and be prepared with questions, right? Well, what I didn't consider is how that learner guide would translate for a screen reader. And so when the learner came to the class, they were like, you know, I got the learner guide, but I could not prepare for the class. And guess what? The entire first 30 to 45 minutes of discussion was about that learner guide. It was the first 2 pages. And so, guess what? That learner felt ostracized. They felt outcasted unintentionally, but still, it was an afterthought, right? I didn't consider it. Um, Me and this person ended up having a beautiful conversation of how the design could have been differently created and different considerations and factors and even technologies that I could use to make that learner guide easier for her screen reader to pick up on. And even just something as simple as how you save the document and how you label images, right? So, like if I had my ICU logo, instead of saving it as just image one, for example, I'm just throwing that out there, I should put ICU logo so that if they hover their mouse over the image, the screen reader will pick up on the name of the logo versus it just saying image. Very little things like that. So, yeah, some other ways that we can consider some social emotional learning fundamentals is some reflection of our own. Mindfulness and meditation is a big one. I started to incorporate these at the beginning of my sessions, like just a quick 2 to 3 minute mindfulness and meditation session before I started my workshops. Because what I learned was a lot of the associates were coming into my classes right off the heels of a meeting, like literally. And you all know you have back-to-back meetings and you don't necessarily have that breathing room in between. And so they're coming in, decompressing live and trying to be present for their course. Well, I was like, that happens to me too. So, what if I not just go right into the learning objectives and workshop, and we just take the first 3 to 5 minutes doing breathing exercises and just resetting, pausing and resetting? It changes the entire experience because I got to press the reset button, not only for myself as someone delivering the content, but for the learner who was coming off of either picking up their child from school, a meeting, or whatever it was. That's self-care. And it felt good. And I got a lot of good reviews. So please take that and run with it. Okay. And there's some other things on there like gratitude practices, character education, et cetera, et cetera. So when would we use these self-care techniques? These are some examples that I'm giving here. You can use them throughout the day. I gave you the example of having the mindfulness a few minutes at the beginning of a session. Icebreakers, if you really want to determine someone's needs, icebreakers is a great way, a fun way, a low stakes way to identify what those needs are in a very short time frame. So I'm going to ask you, as you read some of the examples I have on screen, question number 5, what other ways can we use self-care? I'm turning my head now. I want to see what you say. Oh, I see some notes about the learner guide before a session. Yeah, very helpful. People feel more prepared when they get the learner guide beforehand, and they can anticipate questions sometimes because people don't know what they don't know, and having that learner guide is great beforehand. Yep. What you would recommend as an icebreaker that would allow you to determine someone's needs. So one thing I would definitely do is, and I've done it before, I would have candy, like a candy bowl, and it had different kinds of candies. Oh my gosh, I'm making it seem like I eat a lot. I promise I don't, okay? Because I mentioned food and fried plantains earlier. Anyway, so a bowl of candy or a bowl of fruit, okay, let's be healthier. And then a slide deck with the different types of fruit or candy, like an orange could represent I'm a visual learner and I like pictures and images. A banana could represent, you know, I need printed text, right? And they could just grab the fruit and then we could say, okay, can you elaborate on printed text and how you'd like that while you eat your banana? Like, so that's a way where you can pull it out and it's fun and they get to share that. It's also an opportunity for team members to get to know one another because it may not have been a question that they asked the team member before. And so that's a learning exchange among that team if you're doing it like in a team session or, something like that. So that's an example. Is that helpful? Food is happiness. I agree. What can I do to help you thrive in the class? Love that. Virtual option for the candy bowl. I've actually done images like a slide deck with images and a superhero. So I'm a huge, don't judge me. I love Marvel. I love, all action heroes and animation. So I'll use some animation like Cyclops, right? Cyclops is cool. He's got the eye gadget and everything else. And what does Cyclops represent? And which superhero are you? So calling them, having them identify with a superhero and also sharing what their specific learner needs are, it just puts it synonymous with a superhero and it's very empowering. So that's something that I've done if you want to take that on. Yes, Marble. Yes, Vanya. When I pull up at a drive-through, my sons have a Batman and a Spider-Man car seat. They're like the coolest kids on the block because of those car seats. Little does anybody know, I really bought those car seats for me because that's what I would have wanted to sit in if I was little. But my mom would have never bought it. Anyway, the whole point of self-care is that we don't want to make assumptions. Learner variability is basically telling us to throw assumptions out the window. Okay. Find what people need. Learn more about the whole person to create meaningful opportunities for learning and achievement. That's really what learner variability is. And quite frankly, I find that more fun versus just kind of throwing objectives together and having some images that I think are cool, but not necessarily conducive to the learning. It's more fun to create and design when you're considering everyone, when you're considering different learning variabilities. And it allows for people to share who they are, both strengths and challenges, right? Not just the strengths, to be able to share both of those things and say, I can still learn in this space, regardless of what the strength and the challenge is. And they can still aspire to be exactly who they want to be because they got an opportunity to convey that, right? And share that with you and share that with their peers and other people who can support that learning. Personal preferences sounds like we want to create an experience that's very customized, and that just seems like a lot more work. I'm not going to lie to you, it is a little bit more work. Okay. It's a little bit more work than we're used to, because we're not saying everybody wears a large t-shirt. We're saying some people have a small t-shirt, a medium t-shirt, a large t-shirt, an extra large t-shirt. Right? We're basically considering more than one person. So there is a little bit more work and thoughtfulness that comes with learner variability. But again, it's less work in the future because we're not redesigning because we had a certain population as an afterthought, or we had their needs as an afterthought. So I see learner variability as the foundation. If you're building a house, it's really that main floor, right? You want the main floor to be very solid. And then you could do the bricklaying right on top of it, and it will be unwavering. It will be an unwavering learning experience with a solid foundation of variable learning considerations, right? It just matters. It matters that people can share their story. It matters that people can show up and say, great, this is not just for them, it is also for me. You don't just have right-handed scissors, you have left-handed scissors. And there's different ways to actually measure that. If you want to determine if what you have put in place in terms of self-care methods or self-care additional factors in your courses or however you decide to use it, I would recommend a couple of these bullets that you see here. Have a current state, take a snapshot of what it looks like today so that when you implement some of these fundamentals, you can compare what it looks like in a few months and see if there's any differences, right? Um, Add questions in your survey that ask the learners if they felt or experienced something different than they were used to before. And I would leave that open ended, no multiple choice in that one. Let them open up about what that experience felt like and how different it was. Um, because you may find that they will share and add to it, like, hey, I loved it when you did this. Can you add that? Or if you just remove that color, it would have made it that much easier. So when you leave that question open ended, you'll get a lot more um, you know, information, and they will really share because you're giving them the opportunity to create a more dynamic learning space. Um, you want to document how things progressed and how they regressed, you know that's important as well. So if you have a space where you got KPIs or any type of measurement tools in place already, some quantitative tools, absolutely take those numbers down, document them, and see where you progress and regress. Identify success markers. I love win journals. Okay. Create a win journal that is wonderful for your ROI discussions. It's wonderful for budget discussions. So mark your successes and create a win journal and share it also. Anyhow, I don't believe in implementing things without determining if in case it was effective or not, and how we can always improve upon that effectiveness. So, with that said, revisiting the course objectives. I can't believe the time has flown. It is already 2:50, almost an hour. I thought it was going to be a lot shorter than that, but I've been having fun with you all, and we've been having great discussions about learner variability. So, question number one, this is the sixth, and it says six, but technically it's like 6 through 9 because I'm going to ask you 3 more questions. Um, did I spark your interest in adult learner variability? And you can either say yes or no, or yes, I see hearts and thumbs up. Yes, I love it. Is designing for variability a habit that we learn through practice? Is that a question or a statement, Wesdine? Yes, yes, yes. Question: is designing for variability a habit that we learn through practice? I would have to agree with that. Um, not only a habit, but a continuous consideration, right? So, if, for example, me just introducing myself and putting the closed captioning in before I even started the session, I never used to do that. Okay. But I had to continue to do that to build that muscle and that practice so it became second nature. So, my answer was, Dean, and I hope I'm saying your name correctly, is yes. Try to incorporate into your daily routines so it doesn't come off as a task, but just part of the plan, part of the action steps, right? And not something separate. Okay. I don't know if I saw any other questions in there. Now, another question for you. Do you feel like I accurately discussed the importance of embracing learner variability? Oh, I see hearts. Aw, that touches my heart. Thank you. Let's all go have some snacks. Yes, look at you. Daphne, you are reading off of my love language of food. Yes, let's commune. I love that. Okay. There were some self-care practices that were thrown out there. If you would like all of this, the presentation and everything in one nice one pager, I ask that you go ahead and hit me up. You can scan this QR code. It will lead you to my contact information. It will lead you to my LinkedIn. You can also click on my profile and AirMeet and reach out to me, and I'll send you a one pager that summarizes everything that we talked about in this hour. Lewis said I could use up to an hour. So if you want to use these last 7 minutes to just ask questions, because I saw questions along the way that I couldn't really keep up with, go ahead and ask them now. If not, I just want to say thank you for helping me dust off my cobwebs of facilitating. I told Lewis it's been a while for me. I have not facilitated in a minute. So I was super stoked to be with you all on this Thursday afternoon to talk about things that are so important. And not only important to me, but as you are sharing with your claps and hearts, it's important to you too. Just the fact that you carved time out to attend Lewis's wonderful conference. I want to give a round of applause to the TLDC and Lewis for putting something like this together, and making this such an important part of our day, in our weeks, and our month. Thank you so much for the invite and for the space. So
Thanks, Deborah.
that's it.
You know, you're not off the hook yet. There was a question here that I want to bring up.
Yes.
And let's see. Let me show this one on stage.
Cool.
From Wesdine. Is designing for variability a habit that we learn through practice?
Oh, that's the last question I answered.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it. I was just like tracking. That goes to show how much I'm just like watching everything and not listening as well.
Good.
Let's see. I did see that. I thought Wesdine did after that post that something about a question, but I'm not seeing it. Probably just my overly scrolling everything, trying to look for stuff. But so yeah, it looks like you're good unless I don't see anything else. And Deborah, you did an incredible job of facilitating.
Oh, thank you. It was so much fun.
So congratulations. I love the conversation. The chat was amazing. You had everybody so engaged, and that's what this community is all about, is just having these types of conversations and learning from each other. So thank you for being with us today, Deborah.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, everyone. So we've had 3 sessions so far today. We've got one more at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern. I hope you join us. Let's see. That is with Yvonne. And yeah, that's just coming up in, just over an hour or so. So please take a break. And I am trying to remember the title. Yes, Digital Empathy Labs, Simulating for Diverse User Experiences. I think that is going to be absolutely wonderful. So hope to see you there. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the session. And at some point tomorrow, hopefully we'll get to meet sometime, okay?
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.